Have you ever wondered how one person can simply vanish and become the start of a mystery that just keeps growing? Picture the wide wilds of Alaska, filled with untouched forests, endless ice fields, and secrets lost in the wind. This is where Nora Roland's story begins, and where it almost disappeared forever. In August of 2012, Nora, a well-known biologist who loved nothing more than exploring nature, decided to take a 2-day hike toward the famous Ruth Glacier. She promised her brother she'd be back soon. She'd call when she returned. She said it was just another routine trip. But that call never came. Silence would soon become a question that nobody could answer, and the days ahead would fill her family with worry. Year after year, her story faded into the cold, joining a list of unsolved disappearances. 5 years after Nora stepped onto the Sunshine Trail, a fishing crew worked their way through the thick fog of Prince William Sound. The water was quiet and heavy, ice drifting everywhere, and something strange caught their eye. It wasn't a normal chunk of ice. Inside was a woman, perfectly preserved, her hiking jacket a flash of color in the endless white. The discovery would start up all the old questions, bringing Nora's case back to life and leading everyone straight into one of Alaska's darkest stories. That August morning, Nora pulled into the parking lot at the Sunshine Trail. It was the last time she was seen alive. A camera there caught her getting out of a dark blue Subaru, swinging her backpack onto her shoulder, double-checking her straps the careful way she always did. Her brother said she called him at 9, sounding calm and ready for her hike. She told him she'd go up to the lookout above Ruth Glacier, spend the night, and come back. It was her normal route, not a big challenge, and she seemed confident as always. Her phone activity matched up with her plan perfectly. At 10:27 that morning, her phone logged in one last time near an Arctic Fuel gas station outside Tokitna. She planned to grab fuel for her camping stove before heading into the mountains. The woman working that day remembered a lady in a bright orange jacket hurrying along, trying to get back on the trail before clouds rolled in. That quick stop at the gas station ended up being the last confirmed moment anyone saw Nora at all. The weather, not friendly on most days, became even less so as noon approached. Weather Service reports show that after 11, fierce winds moved over Denali and low clouds clung to the mountaintops. Rangers on duty said that these kinds of weather shifts were nothing new for the area. Warm air from the south would battle with icy gusts blowing from the glaciers, making the weather unpredictable. Even expert travelers like Nora could be taken off guard by it. When evening came on that second day and Nora didn't call, her brother got more and more worried. He called anyone who might know about her hike. He rang her phone over a dozen times, but it only rang through to voicemail. He finally reached out to Anchorage police that night, explaining his sister's habit of always calling after trips like these, how she'd never ignore her family's calls. By 3:40 in the morning, the case had been handed off to Denali Park Rangers. The very next day, the first search team was formed. 6 experienced rescuers from Alaska Mountain Rescue set out on foot, following the path Nora likely chose. They climbed the slope, pushed through a narrow canyon, and reached the observation deck above the glacier. The search logs later released show how they moved carefully, looking for shoe prints, scraps of clothing, signs of campfires, or bits of food packaging. Their leader said that in the first hours they didn't find a single shoe print that belonged to a person. The moss and soft soil on the trail wiped away tracks fast. A crumpled napkin lying near a stone was the only clue, but after testing, it gave nothing useful. On the 5th day, a helicopter with a thermal imaging camera joined the hunt. Its pilot said visibility was okay overall, but fog from the glacier made searching tough up high. 17 air passes mapped out the search area. No sign of a camp, no warm spot, nothing at all. Teams on the ground walked for miles, combing through the tricky maze of main trails, old hunters' paths, hidden pools, and winding lanes between stones. Volunteers in the western part found spots so cramped by thick bush you couldn't see even at arm's length. It was the kind of place where someone could disappear only a few steps off the main path. Every possible idea was weighed. Maybe Nora was hurt, maybe she had fallen into a glacier crack, maybe an animal attacked, or storms came on too fast. But each guess fell apart for the same reason: no sign anywhere of Nora's belongings. Search logs record how no tent, no bits of her bag, no food wrappers, and no waterproof maps ever showed up. Nothing marked where she might have camped or walked. By day 10, with hopes fading, dog handlers from Juneau brought 2 trained dogs to search using Nora's jacket for scent. The dogs picked up something twice, both times near the same trail section next to an old avalanche spot where loose soil could cover anything. But outside that area, nothing. The scent ended, and so did the hope, on August 11th. After 12 draining days, the search heads told everyone the chance of finding Nora alive was almost zero. The operation was pulled back, but not shut down altogether. Any new clue or bit of evidence had to be sent right to detectives in Anchorage. Nora's car was still sitting in the Sunshine parking lot, doors locked, everything neat inside. A guidebook lay on the front seat, open to a page about Ruth Glacier. In her glove compartment, a map was marked at a spot where she wanted to camp that night, a spot that helicopters had flown over and found empty. Police wrote down the official wording: disappearance under unspecified circumstances. No crime was ruled out, but there wasn't enough to prove any cause. Denali National Park added another mystery to its name, another case where it looked like the body would never be recovered. But this time, things would be different. Nature chose not to keep the secret hidden in the forest or hidden on the ground. The answer was drifting away, floating out in the water, where nobody expected to look. In July 2017, the fog over Prince William Sound was so thick that every direction seemed muted and ghostly, hiding everything beyond a short stretch. The crew from the Seawolf trawler said that on mornings like this, the water seemed too quiet, almost like waiting for something to happen, almost daring someone to challenge its balance. Their ship inched along, dodging chunks of ice blown in from the north. Around 10 in the morning, a watchful mechanic saw something floating, something that wasn't a normal sheet of ice. It glowed quietly, clear, almost like glass with a treasure inside. Captain Jack Morrison called to ease the ship forward slowly, careful to avoid a crash. A sailor took out his phone and filmed as their boat slipped through the fog, and the camera caught a wide, flat, oval-shaped ice block sliding by, not alone, but carrying a story with it. Do you remember the feeling of seeing something impossible suddenly become real? That's what the crew of the Seawolf trawler felt that morning as they drifted closer to the shining block of ice. As the ship reached a safe distance, a sailor on the starboard side called out, spotting something unusually bright inside the gleam of clothes that had no business being there. Just 1 minute later, the ship stopped completely. The morning fog pulled back a little, and it became clear that what lay inside was not just ice, but the unmistakable outline of a human body. The scene was chilling in more ways than one. The figure seemed frozen in time, lying kind of curled, back arched, arms clenched close to the chest, head leaned over as if in sleep or shock. Even though the jacket looked foggy under layers of ice, its shining orange color held strong, stubborn against the cold. Captain Jack Morrison later told the Coast Guard that the moment hit him hard. Like a punch to the gut, this was not a piece of debris, this was someone lost to time. He ordered the ship's lights switched on and immediately radioed the Valdez port coordinator, voice steady but urgent. There is a person in the ice floe. Appears to be deceased. Body fully intact. The Coast Guard replied quickly. They warned the crew not to touch the ice or move anything themselves. Within 2 hours, the Coast Guard boat reached the crew with their special equipment. The officer in charge would later say the ice wasn't just big, it was unnaturally clear, almost like it had formed in a flash without any debris mixed in. The body inside could be seen plainly, like looking through glass at someone sleeping. The rescue team looped heavy slings around the icy mass, working slowly and carefully, the ice weighing several hundred pounds. As they lifted it, they made sure not to damage the structure, trying to keep everything as it was. One rescuer said the body stayed absolutely still, no damage at all. Nothing like what you'd expect after years in the sea. Once on deck, the ice block was covered with a thick tarp to keep the sun and air at bay. The entire crew watched, silent and distant, feeling the weight of the moment. Some later said they had never seen a body look this untouched, like time stopped for her only minutes ago. The silence was heavy, everyone careful not to disturb anything, even with their voices. When the ship reached Valdez, the ice was handed off to the local morgue by the Coast Guard at 5 in the evening. The gradual melting began, overseen by an expert who managed the temperature so the body wouldn't be harmed. This step took over 3 painstaking hours. As the ice shrunk away, what emerged was nothing short of remarkable clothes. Shoes, backpack straps, everything looked just as it would have on a regular day out hiking. The bright orange jacket caught everyone's eye immediately. It matched styles that had been favorites among Denali Park tourists years earlier. In the right pocket, they found a small flashlight, essential for camping, and deep in another pocket was a crumpled, nearly unreadable receipt from the Arctic Futures printing house. The faded numbers looked close to those tied to the period when Nora Roland first went missing. Inside the sturdy backpack, the examiners found a metal canteen, camping gear, a folded map of Ruth Glacier's area, and a special waterproof pouch notebook inside, wet but not totally ruined. Its pages stuck together from years in icy silence. Not wanting to damage anything, the forensic team decided to dry the notebook later by vacuum, hoping more secrets would survive. What happened next was a rush of law enforcement action. Following standard protocol, the chief of Valdez Police got Anchorage detectives on the phone that same night, before any official findings were even reported. The call was short, but its meaning was huge. We have a body from an ice floe. It seems to be related to that old disappearance in the mountains. So much history packed into 2 sentences. Echoing years of unanswered questions, hope, and heartbreak. Photos taken as the ice melted joined the evidence file immediately. They showed a woman with dark, braided hair, her face looking nearly undamaged except for the pale blue tint left by the ice, almost like she'd been paused in time. The pathologist noted the position of the body, arms tightly pressed to her chest, shoulders squeezed, a sign she'd been hit with sudden fear or pain, her body reacting in its final moments of that same evening. 2 police officers from Anchorage flew directly to Valdez to stand witness at the close of the first exam. Their arrival was written down at 10:30 in the morning, keeping strict records as they moved from the ship to the morgue. At first, the experts couldn't name the woman, but clues in her jacket changed everything. In her pocket, they found a waterproof wallet with a driver's license, Nora Roland's. For the detectives who'd chased her disappearance 5 years earlier, finding her official ID was a huge breakthrough, but it wasn't enough on its own. As with all good detective work, confirmation needed more. The lead pathologist, Kaya Myers, insisted on checking dental records next. She'd learned from experience that clothes and ID can be swapped, but teeth tell the truth. The dental charts from Anchorage Dental Clinic arrived at 2 in the morning. The comparison took patience, working mostly by hand with magnifying lenses and careful pressure. Frozen teeth can be delicate, and Myers took no chances. After half an hour, everything lined up perfectly. In her official report, she wrote, "Identity confirmed with absolute certainty." Every unique protrusion, every old filling mark matched Nora Roland's data. Silence followed the confirmation, filled with relief and sorrow. These details finally closed the loop for investigators. As news traveled back to Anchorage, the police were careful with their reaction. One of the detectives who had led the search for Nora admitted in a note, "I did not expect to see Roland's name in the report from Valdez." For years, almost everyone believed Nora's body had been lost in the mountains forever, trapped among rocks or hidden by glacier snow. Her sudden return, held inside a crystal ice block, was something nobody had imagined. When the family learned the truth, the moment mixed heartbreak and healing. Nora's close friend, present when the family was told, said the shock was hard, but the end of the waiting was soothing in its own way. 5 years may seem short to some, but every day of not knowing is its own kind of pain. Now, at last, her story could move forward. The scientific side of the case was just as gripping. Experts all agreed that the thick, rare ice had protected Nora from decay almost entirely. But just as important was the question nobody could answer yet. How did she end up in the bay in the first place? The ocean and glaciers read like open books to some, but to others, they just held more secrets. The forensic team worked late, wasting no time. As soon as the ice had finished melting, they began handling each item from her gear and clothing, all the small details helping build the story. Kaya Myers, who had spent years in Alaska's permafrost, took special note of the skin's impressive texture, the way everything seemed to defy the rules of time. In the jacket's right pocket, she confirmed the waterproof wallet and the name Nora Roland. But Myers explained to detectives that even this wasn't enough on its own. Documents travel, clothes are swapped, and stories change, so it was the teeth that finally ended all doubt. The dental charts arrived early in the morning. And working patiently with a magnifier and microscope, Myers and her team compared each feature line by line. Within minutes, her confidence grew. The fillings, the unique shapes, everything agreed with Nora's historic dental records. Soon, Anchorage received the final answer, and the cold mystery started to thaw. Finding Nora had sent shockwaves across Alaska. Newspapers wrote about a woman returned by the sea, frozen in time. News stations broadcast images of her almost untouched form, marveling that nature could keep a person so whole for so long. Some called it a miracle, others saw only more unanswered questions. Why did the ice not break her body? How had she lasted so long in the endless cold? And most importantly, how did her journey end with her floating in Prince William Sound, miles away from where she started? Each question promised twists ahead. The forensic team kept working late, determined to find every piece of evidence, every scrap of proof. Nora's case was not just a mystery to solve, but a lesson in how the wild cares for its secrets. For her family, the news brought peace mixed with sadness and end, but also a beginning. There are moments when the truth brings more comfort than anyone expects. And for Nora's family, finally knowing where she was meant, they could let go of the constant worry she was still suffering or lost somewhere in the cold mountains. After the first exam of her frozen body, authorities moved her to Anchorage, wanting to dig deeper into what happened. This wasn't just to confirm it was Nora, but also because the case had already spun far beyond anything normal. Expert reports all agreed on one thing: the way her skin and clothing look showed she'd plunged into freezing temperatures almost immediately. Her death and the sudden ice around her must have happened together in the blink of an eye, in truly rare conditions that even shocked professionals. As detectives looked over Nora's remains, they zeroed in on her hiking boots. They were a popular brand, familiar to anyone who'd hiked Denali and carried a tread pattern volunteers were told to search for. But those boots hadn't been found during the original search 5 years ago. They now rested on the table, stunningly well preserved, almost untouched by any long trek. For the boot specialist, this was baffling. It looked as if Nora had walked only a few miles, not traveled a rocky trail for days. The soles were in near-perfect condition. This didn't match what everyone knew about Nora's route, that she should have crossed the challenging slopes and rough paths on the Sunshine Trail. It raised big questions, drawing everyone's attention deeper into the mystery. While combing through her jacket, investigators also discovered a thin silver necklace with a peculiar plate pendant. On its surface were faint, scratched lines, almost like coordinates scribbled in haste. They couldn't read the marks at first, due to oxidation and age, so the pendant was sent for chemical testing. Nora's brother, shown the pendant, told officers she never wore something like that in her regular life. It stood out, begging for answers that wouldn't come easily. The biggest question for everyone now was simple, but felt impossible. How did Nora's body end up inside a giant block of ice floating in the bay when she disappeared miles and miles away in the mountains? Natural patterns of ice movement couldn't explain it. The Ruth Glacier, where she'd hiked, did not feed directly into the ocean, and rivers from its melting waters couldn't transport a body that far without leaving obvious clues. In the police log that night, a short but powerful sentence appeared. The path to the bay is unknown and requires study of the ice's formation. This point became the turning edge for the investigation. Instead of closing the case, detectives had to go back, open old files, dust off evidence from 5 years before, and look for answers they'd missed. Nora's family was allowed to take her home for burial, but they paused, wanting first to find out what truly happened to her in those final hours. For them, Giving her the respect she deserved meant understanding the story behind her death, not just laying her to rest. Her body stayed in Anchorage longer, waiting for specialists who could reveal the last clues. More exams were scheduled. Not just for closure, but for truth. Once Nora's identity was locked in, the case officially restarted. Detective Tom Scott, who worked the first search, now had all the files and notes in his hands, ready to start over. He made fresh reports, noting right away that there were no injuries that could show her body had floated in open water for years. For Scott, this mattered. A body like that would have clear marks, but Nora's didn't, he guessed correctly. That the ice block had not formed just in the Gulf. It had come from much farther north, from a place of steady, harsh cold. Wondering how such a huge block of super clear ice could land in Prince William Sound, Scott contacted glaciologists at the University of Alaska. He met with them and looked over maps, learning that ice of this kind often forms at the fronts of active glaciers, then breaks loose in dramatic collapses before riding the currents into open water. Some expert explained the process can happen anytime the exact mix of melting water, moving ice, and sudden cold snap comes together. During that summer, ocean maps showed strong blasts of cold water streaming into the Gulf from the north, carrying ice chunks for long stretches. If a block like the one that carried Nora's body hit the right current, it could drift for weeks without breaking up. To Scott, this changed the game. Nora must have frozen not out in the ocean, but deeper inside one of the massive glaciers that skirt the northern edge of the coastline. Scott began checking every glacier that could make icebergs big enough to hold Nora's body. He listed out names: the Chile, Shukachev, Allison, and the biggest of all, the Columbia Glacier. Experts said the Columbia Glacier is the region's main source of big icebergs, its front edge breaking apart several times a year in huge, thunderous collapses that sometimes trigger tsunamis. Bringing the size of the ice block the sailors found next to the data on Columbia's average collapses, Scott added a new line. The odds are high this is from Columbia Glacier. But this discovery opened more questions than it answered. If Nora's body came out of Columbia Glacier, then how did she reach it, with her actual trail pointing at Ruth Glacier far from the coast? None of the original scenarios showed her leaving Ruth and heading to the sea. The lines between these wild places run deep with ridges and deathly cracks. Many slopes so unstable they're closed off to hikers because avalanches or hidden crevasses can swallow anything. Scott dug through old aerial photos, searching for clues in the patterns of ice movement. When Scott showed these photos to the glaciologists, they explained that inside Columbia Glacier is a secret network of tunnels, hollowed out by meltwater running deep under the ice, sometimes hauling along rocks, wood, even trees. Under certain, rare conditions, this under-ice river could sweep up anything, even a person, if the drainage system happened to connect with open cracks in the glacier's upper regions. If someone fell through one of these cracks, the water could pull them into the maze below. The detective's notes became more focused now. There is a possibility Nora fell into a subglacial channel soon after death. Such channels can lock objects inside, freezing them nearly in an instant. If the underground water changed direction, it could pull the frozen body far, all the way to the glacier's foot, then cast it out with new ice years later. Scott's study of geological data led him to an old quarry zone in the northwest, where some now closed trails used to lead explorers. Documents showed that, years ago, meltwater sometimes flooded the quarry's mine, tunnels evidence of underground reservoirs that could link up with the glacier's headwaters. The connection wasn't proven, but it sparked the idea that perhaps Nora hadn't just wandered off her trail. Maybe she ended up close to one of those treacherous crevasses leading right into the heart of the subglacial tunnels. A crack invisible to explorers, only opening at certain times of the year, these questions pressed in from all sides. Was Nora really lost, or did she stumble across one of the rare gateways into the hidden world inside a glacier? The more Scott looked, the more it seemed the mountains were hiding more than just her body. They were keeping the very path secret, tucked away for nature alone to reveal. That season, as experts continued to search for tiny markers in the ice and stone, hope grew not to solve every part of the case, but to understand the wild forces that run in the heart of Alaska's frozen land. Each clue told a little more about Nora's last days, turning the tragedy into a puzzle that demanded answers, making everyone see the wilderness with new eyes both for its dangers and its never-ending mysteries. Detective Tom Scott was determined not to rush toward any conclusion. Instead, he made a clear note in his diary, reminding himself of the one thing that mattered most for the investigation: to truly understand how Nora's body ended up so far from where she disappeared, the key was establishing the point of entry, the place where she first met the ice. This simple idea would shape everything that followed. Scott knew one thing already. The ice block came from the north, and it probably originated from the Columbia Glacier. But the rest remained tangled. The biggest question wasn't about glaciers or currents. It was about where Nora herself first crossed the line between land and the icy world below, to get closer to the truth. Detective Scott returned to the old files and decided to do what any good investigator does when stuck. Start from the beginning. He called Nora's brother, not just for details, but to try catching anything new. The brother confessed that, in the weeks before Nora's hike, she'd been unusually enthusiastic about her fieldwork. Her kitchen was covered in post-it notes scribbled with location names, routes, and quick thoughts about the birds she tracked. Yet he remembered something else now, something that meant much more in hindsight. A few days before leaving for Denali, Nora told him she'd discovered a mention of an abandoned quarry not listed on current maps. Digging even deeper, Scott asked for access to Nora's personal papers. He found her notebook, the one rescued from her backpack after all those years. Though the first pages were partly ruined, one blurry scrap stood out. It read, "Is Grey Rock a bat colony? Check it out." The note was dated about a week before she vanished, matching the times of her online searches and phone calls from home. Grey Rock Quarry wasn't well known. Only geologists and a few locals remembered it. The place had been shut down long ago. Bad conditions, shifting ground, unexpected collapses, and sudden floods from melting ice breaking through underground spaces connected to the Columbia Glacier. Scott learned from an old quarry worker, found through ancient journals, that spring and summer often created huge lakes of meltwater under the surface. When pressure built up, these hidden lakes burst out with force, flooding the lowest passageways and changing everything below in minutes. Even though the quarry was far from Columbia Glacier's visible edge, glaciologists confirmed the site was tangled in the same web of underground drainage. It was a place where danger always threatened to reshape the land. Underground tunnels could appear, vanish, and break even the most stable ground with no warning. With the notebook in his hands, Scott used magnifying glasses to read every faded line. Nora had made tiny notes. One entry said, "Old tunnels," another warned, "The entrance can only be opened in summer." This showed she planned not just a minor visit, but a real scientific survey, maybe on her own to avoid drawing attention. Her brother told Scott he never heard. Nora mentioned the quarry before only the usual route along Ruth Glacier. Scott started mapping Nora's official route next to the spots where the abandoned production areas lay. He soon found that at several junctions, Sunshine Trail drifted off its main path by a short walk, reaching old technical passages, almost invisible, grown over, and easy to miss for a casual visitor. Dangerous places too. A local hunter once vanished there and wasn't found until the next summer, lost in a ravine carved open by a meltwater flood. That case was written up in the Forest Service's records. A geologist who worked near Grey Rock told Scott that bat researchers often came for rare species, hidden in deep tunnels left after mining stopped. Through writings and rumors Nora would have learned about possible bat colonies from dissertations or scientific papers she read before her trip. Detective Scott scribbled a list of reasons why Nora might have strayed from her normal trail. Maybe she was searching for the bat colony she'd found out about. Maybe she wandered onto an old industrial path by accident. Maybe she intentionally went to the quarry, keeping her plans quiet so she wouldn't have to explain them. But one fact loomed. To reach Grey Rock, she'd need to cross terrain famous for landslides and ground falling away suddenly. The Forest Service had plenty of reports of collapsing earth, all caused by hidden water chambers under the old mines. covered with thick moss and leaf litter. Scott wrote down in his report, "If Nora turned toward the mine area, it's possible she stood on unstable ground that fell beneath her. If the worst had happened, the water rushing below could have swept her away, carrying her into a system of tunnels feeding the heart of the Columbia Glacier." At this point, all Scott had were fragments, bits of maps, faded notebook lines, hints from old voices. He still didn't have proof, but he was closer than ever. What was certain now was that Nora had bigger plans for bat research than anyone knew. The Grey Rock site was probably the only real place she'd go to follow those plans when the news about Nora's possible link to the abandoned Grey Rock quarry area made it to the press. Scott was ready for nothing. The story appeared as a brief police request for tips, printed in a small piece in local Anchorage and Toquetna papers. "If you saw a tourist in August 2012, please call," it said. Most people probably ignored the notice, but that afternoon, Scott's phone rang. The operator who answered remembered a man speaking quickly, voice tense and urgent. He didn't ramble, just said, "Ben from Toquetna." A few minutes later, Scott was on the line. Ben remembered August that year in detail. He'd been working for Nordic Services, a private geology company investigating rocks near the Matanusa-Susitna area. Almost every morning, he stopped at the Arctic Fuel gas station, picking up coffee and supplies with other field workers before heading into the wild. Ben recalled seeing a young woman one morning. Her jacket was a bright, sharp color, travel's gear all ready, her backpack carefully checked and readjusted, like someone headed for a hard trip. It was nothing unusual for Toquetna in summer, with tourists always gathering supplies for their hikes or catching rides to distant hunting grounds. But Ben noticed something else. Even among all the hikers, this woman seemed especially focused, checking her backpack straps over and over, looking like she had an important goal. As Ben paid inside, a truck pulled up outside with a Stone Company logo. Ben recognized it instantly. They'd been working near old mining grounds in the Grey Rock area for years, and the logo was burned into his memory. Ben watched as the driver spoke with the woman, and she quickly climbed into the cab without hesitation, stowing her backpack in the back and shutting the door. He didn't hear the actual talk, but the scene struck him so normal, but somehow important now. Detective Scott wrote, "Witness gave a direct sign of a vehicle that could have been going to the quarry." This seemed to finally fill in the missing gap. Nora had been last seen heading toward Grey Rock, not just hiking her old trail. The connection between the quarry, the flooded grounds, and her unusual interest in bats gave new life to the whole story. Now, for the first time, everything started coming together: the underground tunnels, the landslides, the sudden changes in the landscape, and the one trip Nora made that nobody but herself fully understood. Scott could feel the investigation changing. Every small tip, each old piece of evidence, and Ben's memory of that summer built a more complex picture. It was no longer a simple case of a hiker gone missing, but a story about choices, curiosity, and the wild ways Alaska could twist one day into another. Maybe it was exactly for this reason that Nora had written so many notes and kept her plans quiet. She'd gone looking for answers, and even in the silence of the ice, her final journey kept pushing toward the truth. This was the first real breakthrough in the case, the kind of clue that wasn't just a guess or a faded reminder written in Nora's old notebook. Ben's story made it clear that for the first time, Nora might have changed her route not because she wanted to, but because someone offered her a lift. If she'd gotten into that truck heading for Grey Rock, everything from that day finally made sense: why she was never found along the trail, and why the search teams came up empty every time. Detective Scott was determined to follow this lead. He drove to Toquetna himself, hoping to speak to Ben face-to-face and get every detail straight from him. Ben was guarded but certain in his memory. He pointed out exactly where the truck was parked when Nora climbed in, an aging gas station just a little way from the entrance. Ben was sure of the truck's look. It wasn't new. It had scratches down one side and a strong metal grill fitted to the front. Scott knew this kind of grill was only on heavy-duty mining trucks. He dug into the transport records, combing through logs and documents kept by local inspectors for commercial vehicles running in the area back then. The search brought up a handful of companies using similar trucks, but one stood out: the Sierra Scala Quarry. Ben's memory had matched the records. This left little doubt that his testimony was honest and accurate. With new momentum, Scott put together a new theory in the case. Maybe Nora didn't wander off by mistake, and maybe she hadn't planned her entire route alone. Maybe that day she climbed into a miner's truck heading directly for the quarry, either by choice or simply because she was confused. This one moment could have changed her whole path, shifting everything. She was no longer walking through the mountains toward Ruth Glacier, not camping as she said she would, not even traveling through the region where people looked for her. Instead, her destination became the old quarry. Scott widened the investigation, needing answers wherever he could find them. He pressed Ben for any more clues about the driver, then remembered little about him, a broad man in a dark hat and beard with a big frame. One thing stuck out though, the loud sound of a radio from inside the cab. Not music, but technical chatter, the kind heard around mining sites for work updates. Ben said the truck drove in the direction of the road workers always took towards Sierra Scala. Scott double-checked this by talking to the gas station employee, who confirmed that she had noticed a battered old truck lingering near the exit for several minutes around that same time. She didn't see Nora get in, but she did remember the engine running softly for a long stretch. Based on these witness accounts, Scott made a new note in his file. Both people saw the truck on the same day, following the same route, a match too firm to ignore. Looking over detailed maps of the area, Scott saw only one industrial road led to the quarry, and into a complex web of technical paths that hadn't been maintained in years. If Nora really went there, it became clear why the volunteers never saw a trace of her at Denali. But Ben's story also did something even more important. It offered up, for the first time ever, a realistic route not tied to Nora's official plans, but to chance, to the acts of other people. Maybe she didn't choose it, maybe it just happened. The case reached a new stage. The maps and notes, the search logs and rescue records had finally run out. Detective Scott realized that, to get anywhere, he needed a person, a witness who knew exactly what went down at Grey Rock during August 2012. He started tracking employees who once worked there. The quarry had long changed owners, the files were lost, and most of the crew had scattered across the country. After weeks of searching, one name finally popped up from the past: Raymond Lambert. A manager on site at the exact time Nora vanished. Raymond Lambert lived in a remote northern town in a quiet old trailer, worn by years and wind. Scott drove hours to knock on his door, nearly running on hope alone. Lambert answered like he'd been expecting a visit for years. It took time, and Scott was patient. Bit by bit, Lambert began to talk. Everything was officially recorded, even though Scott wrote that Lambert seemed nervous throughout, as if he dreaded more than just police questions. Lambert explained that the quarry was busy that month. They were running difficult blasting operations, using explosives to keep the meltwater from the Columbia Glacier from smashing into lower rock levels. The workers were carving out special channels meant to keep sudden floods from tearing apart the site. But as Lambert said, safety routines were sometimes skipped, and rules bent. Grey Rock was no stranger to trouble. One day, he noticed something out of place: a stranger with a backpack and a bright orange jacket, wandering near a ventilation shaft no tourist would ever find. One of the younger workers walked up, and Lambert saw Nora show him something in her notebook. They talked for just a moment from a distance, then she wandered along the cliff line. Then came the warning siren, blasting out to alert the crew before the explosives went off, but Lambert's records and the official logs both revealed something strange. The warning siren sounded late. There was a technical hiccup, a missed transmission somewhere in the system, all tied up in a delay. No sabotage, no foul play, just an inexperienced worker running the alarms for his first month on the job. The man would leave the state soon after and was never properly identified, according to Lambert. Nora was far too close to the risky edge when the explosion happened. The blast rolled through the quarry, trembling the rocks and earth. Suddenly, the ground below her failed, a landslide straight into a hidden cavity full of icy meltwater. Nobody saw the instant it happened, but several in the crew heard a scream cut through the sound of falling rocks. When they arrived at the edge, the whole area below was a mess, covered in churning, murky water. Panic swept through the team. The threat was clear. An outsider might have fallen into the collapse zone. If that became official knowledge, the quarry would get shut down, hundreds would lose their jobs, and a wall of legal trouble would come pouring down. The fear left the workers desperate and unwilling to even get close to the water. Lambert said management decided, in his words, on a course that was cowardly and tragic. They ordered the crew not to touch the rubble, not to search the ruined mining hallways, not to disturb a single stone. Their logic was simple and cold, without a body. There was no incident, no trouble, no record. Lambert confirmed these words came straight from the site manager's mouth, though he wouldn't give the name. The day finished like any other, with no accidents written up, no alarms raised. But the water at the base of the quarry, as several noted, did not behave normally. The surface was drawn downward, like something tugged deep into the stone. Lambert described these dips and surges as linked to secret underground chambers, the hidden veins of meltwater that pushed into the glaciers. Nobody liked knowing about those channels. They were more feared than cave-ins. The sense of risk lingered for days, but nobody spoke out. The workers went on with their jobs, hoping the cold, dark water would keep its secrets. For Detective Scott, this was the story that finally finished drawing the map from Nora's last steps to her icy fate. Journey shaped not just by nature or personal choices, but by an accident, a decision, and quiet fear. The true danger of those underground glacier channels was finally understood. They were unpredictable, always shifting, and strong enough to pull down anything or anyone that got too close. Lambert admitted that by the evening of Nora's fall, management faced a grim reality. If a person is pulled into one of those hidden water cavities, no rescue mission could ever get them out again. The water moved too deep, below any reach, and hope faded as fast as the light. In the end, the decision was made: don't reveal the accident. If no one could fix it, no one wanted to ruin the quarry's future. Scott wrote each observation into his official report, detailing every word from his talk with Lambert. He sensed that Lambert spoke with the weight of years spent hiding the truth, a man living with endless guilt. Still, Scott had to include all viewpoints. There was no solid evidence to prove Nora died right then and there in the collapse. All that existed was the memory of screams vanishing into the darkness below, and the workers' stories about that sudden, watery sinkhole. When Scott spoke with more quarry workers, their tales matched up. Something crashed. The ground caved in, and management told everyone to keep working. Direct facts were scarce, but the truth hovered everywhere. Just out of reach. Lambert told Scott that the quarry ran at the edge of safety, barely holding on. Old mine tunnels hadn't been looked after or reinforced. Water from the melting glacier kept forcing its way into the hollows, breaking through and changing the shape of the ground without warning. Sometimes the alarm systems worked, and sometimes they didn't. When a stranger entered the danger zone, management treated her as a problem, not as a person who might need help. Scott added a careful note after he finished his talk. By the best witness accounts, Nora's body was likely drawn into an underground water tunnel, passing into the glacier's secret channels. From then on, what happened next was beyond anyone's control. That line was the single most important clue. Nora Roland was not just lost on a trail or missing through accident. Her fate was a tragedy that other people witnessed but then covered up, leaving her family and rescuers searching in the wrong places for years. When scientists provided their first detailed map of Columbia Glacier's network, Scott saw it all laid out, a system of shifting tunnels deep under the ice, reshaped every season by water levels and pressure, by the constant stress of sliding ice. These channels stretched for many miles, with enough power to carry boulders, trees, and big machinery from the quarry all the way through the glacier. And, as it turned out, the body of a missing biologist, the very place where Nora vanished. Grey Rock Quarry sat right above one of these watery mazes. Glaciologists explain that when water seeps into the deep cavities, it can produce a suction strong as a siphon. Even something large didn't have a chance. The force would quickly disappear it from sight, dragging it down into the ice. After Lambert's confession, it was clear Nora had been picked up by such a current, helpless against its pull. She vanished from the workers' view in minutes, lost in a hidden world beneath their feet. The technical report written up for the detectives clarified the next steps. If Nora's body fell into a meltwater channel on the glacier's upper surface, she would be pulled into swirling corridors between layers of ice, carried in darkness. This was not just a frozen grave, it was a vast living system where glaciers groan, collapse, and move under their own weight, always shifting forward. Once Nora was carried inside, the falling temperature began the next phase. Water freezes in layers, first near the surface, then deeper and deeper, locking anything inside in a block of hard, pure ice. It became her tomb, holding her exactly as she was. Her features untouched by years. According to natural motion rates, Columbia Glacier slides relentlessly towards the sea, sometimes moving yards every year. Inside it, boulders, trees, and ancient secrets ride along, shifting with the slow river of ice. When the edge of the glacier breaks off into the ocean, big pieces become icebergs. That's how Nora's icy coffin was finally released to the ocean. Piece sheared away as the glacier's mass entered the salty water and broke apart. One scientific detail fascinated the detectives. Objects close to the glacier's surface sometimes spend years frozen in perfect form, only breaking free if a new crack or pressure wave splits the ice. Nora's body, scientists agreed, was released like this. Nature's timing allowed her to remain almost perfectly preserved, separated from rocks or debris, as if nature wanted to protect her for one more journey. For 5 years, Nora's family wondered and waited. In that time, her body moved first fast, then slowly, then fixed in place as the world outside changed with each season. Lambert described how every now and then the quarry chambers filled so quickly and so fully that nothing could ever be found. Each event was part of a vast cycle, a chain set in motion by nature but always touched by human hands. Detectives compared every seasonal flood record and found that the summer Nora vanished was one of the wettest ever, with meltwater at record highs. Data from the glaciology lab suggested that during warm months, water speeds through subglacial tunnels at such a rate that even a person could be swept for many miles in only a matter of weeks. Once frozen, the body traveled as part of the glacier itself, in a process both powerful and slow, before breaking free only when nature allowed. To support the case, ice samples from the block found in the bay were tested. Scientists confirmed that the monolith around Nora's body formed inside the glacier, not in ocean water. That proved she died and was entombed deep within, long before she was ever set adrift. The samples held other secrets, 2 fine layers showing rapid freezing matching the expert models perfectly. The case file was filled. Nora's path from the quarry to the glacier, from glacier to sea, from cold darkness to the light of the world once more. Law enforcement and prosecutors pursued a new line of investigation, now following up on decades-old company violations. Lambert helped, but his knowledge was limited. Many old employees stayed unregistered or had disappeared completely, and the quarry's management went missing in the official records. Still, enough was known to bring up charges covering up an incident, skipping safety checks, silencing a disaster. The real decision-makers, those who chose silence over rescue, were never found. For Nora's family, the news brought mixed feelings. Yes, the truth was now known. She hadn't gotten lost on a high trail or died in a lonely accident. A chain of failures, both human and natural, led to her end. People failed her first, and nature finished it. Yet, at last, after so many years, the land returned what it had hidden. Nora's story became a lesson, a warning for those who thought everything could be controlled or covered up. The official summary that closed the investigation was short. Roland's body went from quarry to glacier system and then out to the ocean, propelled by the glacier's silent power. However, this was not only nature's work, but the result of a cover-up that lasted years, until fate and time finally forced the truth out. Local papers called Nora's story haunting, a legend that belonged to the harsh north, where secrets are kept, but sometimes, just sometimes, the landscape gives up its story at last.